Welcome back. Today, we have an extra special treat for everybody. Today, we have two guests. We have a returning guest, and we have a new guest. Both of these men are two people that I have the utmost respect for. I have for the longest time. They are both titans in the pharmaceutical industry and have been for some time. What they're doing currently is absolutely incredible. They've created a company called Ignite Biomedical that is focused on creating treatment response predictors of certain disease states that will allow AI algorithmic models to help us use precision medicine. We're going to get into all that today. We're going to get into the state of healthcare. Very excited about it. Two of my friends, mentors, Claudio Faria, Jake Nichols. Welcome, guys.
Yeah. Thanks
for having
man.
us. Yeah, thanks. Great to be back.
Yeah.
Yeah, giddy up, Jake,
Yeah.
returning guest. You know
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Round two for you.
Yep.
Round two, and Claudio, great to have you, brother.
Of course, man.
You want to?
Glad to be here.
Jake, when we did our podcast together, he was telling me about this.
Yeah.
He was telling me about Ignite and about how this was, and I saw this fire. I've known Jake for a long time, and we've had some our relationship exists in passion. It exists in passion and trying to help each other and help the world and making the world a better place. And how excited he was about this. I was just, this is it. This is going to be the one. And then just to see you and to know that you were a part of it and that you guys are doing this together is an incredible thing. It makes me have hope in pharmacy, something that I was kind of had left behind, not left behind entirely, but was doing my own thing and doing pharmacy in my own way.
Yeah. Us too.
Yeah, you guys too.
Same.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. So just grateful to have you guys here.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks again for having us.
Yeah. This is great, man. Thank you.
Yeah, giddy up. So before we get into Ignite, I just a big topic on this show and what we talk about a lot is like the state of healthcare and there's what's going on with the world and how a lot of people right now for me at least, and kind of why I started to Jake, we talked about it on our show, is how people thought that randomized controlled trials were the be-all, end-all, and the only gold standard of medicine. And I do agree that they are, but it's not the be-all, end-all, and it's not just everything. It's not every piece. And so we're starting to see that some stuff in our past has not always been true, and that medicine is just changing.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you guys where you guys are landing on the current landscape of the world.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, to address your first point on clinical trials, we've needed to evolve that process for quite some time. So that's the first thing, because if you look at how we approve drugs, how we approve formulary decisions, everything is based on population. And then we try to drill that down and treat a patient sitting in a chair or at a bedside, so it's very difficult for us to kind of, dwindle all that information down to make a patient decision. So that's really the first thing. And we talk a lot about that when we talk about technology we're producing and why it's important. It's also driving that change with respect to how things are approved. So if you look at, any clinical trial result, you'll see averages. You'll see population-based averages. And, that's how we approve drugs. And that's the best way to do it. I'm not arguing that point. But now you take all that information and you give it to physicians and pharmacists and clinicians and say, hey, make a decision for you. Yeah. For us, it's very difficult to do that. And that's why we say medicine is an art, more than art than a science, because we have to take all that information, all our different perspectives, everything, and make the best clinical course for a patient. That's very difficult to do.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult. And I think what this goes back to ultimately, at least in my mind, is that our system is broken. I don't think there's anybody out there, regardless of your political affiliations or what area of medicine you practice in, would disagree with that statement.
Yeah.
And I think the foundation of that is a very outdated model around how we practice medicine, how we initiate treatments, how we care for patients. And you can look at it from many different aspects. It's from clinician aspects, it's from pharma aspects, it's from regulatory aspects. We're still doing things the same way we did 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work anymore.
It doesn't.
And more importantly, we have better technology and we know more at this point to be able to do better.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately the reason why we founded Ignite.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of frustration around that, right? Like I know so many unbelievably smart clinicians, doctors, pharmacists who want to do that art. Yeah. They want to create. They want to use their beautiful brains and what they've learned to create the best outcomes for their patients. And we can't have systems where that is, and sometimes because of the mainstream medicine, the academia model, how I can understand why it existed because it needed to have that authority, and you need to have that authority in medicine. But it's gone too far where they haven't allowed the artists, these beautiful people, to put their paint on the on the easel.
It's too rigid.
No.
It's too rigid.
You don't have the right tools.
Right.
You don't.
Right.
We can't be dependent on current practice to evolve medicine. And even what surprised us when we got into this is the state of treatment response, and looking at all these therapeutic classes that provide almost no benefit to patients. I mean, there's some drug classes that response rates are as low as 4%. 100 patients, imagine that, 100 patients take a drug, 96 experience no benefit. Imagine if that was okay in other industries. Imagine if your flight's only on time 4% of the time, or, you got this fancy iPhone in your pocket.
Not on time, only brings you to the right place 4% of the time.
That's right.
That's what we're talking about with drugs.
That's right.
Exactly.
We want outcome-based stuff.
It's unacceptable in any other sector, but in healthcare we allow it.
Right.
And that needs to change.
It's so true. Like when I was in school, like we would learn about specific patient populations and how certain drugs would work within these specific. And I thought to myself, I said, well, that's going to be a really cool thing that we need to start studying like ASAP. And maybe right when I get out of school, this is what we'll be studying.
Yeah.
I got out of school in 2015 and it wasn't happening. I'm like, why aren't we? Why are we? We know that this specific patient population does not do well with ACE inhibitors.
Right.
Yeah. So why are we still prescribing them ACE inhibitors?
Yeah. It's a great question, and again, it's a result of how we're trained in this very rigid mindset. Especially as pharmacists, you're taught that there's specific applications for things in certain scenarios, and to your point, Steve, there's also specific situations where we don't want to employ certain medications. But regardless, again, all of that is based on this very loose definition and threshold for what's efficacious and what's safe. Yeah. And in many cases, that's just not enough. And it's astounding, really, when you look back through it historically, how many drugs have been approved that have a very small rate of efficacy. But there are certain patients that will do well. And again, that's another thing that we're trying to solve is who exactly is that population, albeit maybe a very small number of patients, but who are those people that will respond? So we can get the medication to those people and not waste it on people that don't need it or are likely to experience an adverse event.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always fascinated me that, when you read the results of a trial, there's always a group that has a super response or a response or no response. But we don't delve into any of those details. We just take the average and say, okay, it works in psoriasis or it works in something else.
Right.
We should be digging in. That's the juicy details that we should be really digging into. Yeah. Figuring out, okay, why are you a super responder and I received no response at all?
Right.
And again, that's to Jake's point, kind of the foundation of what Ignite is trying to figure out.
Was this a problem? Because I know you guys have a lot of experience within clinical research and trials, and so was this a problem, for the averages? Like we're never actually, we just have the average, and we're not ever studying it. But do we have technology beforehand that was available to us to be able to do any of this, or is this just completely novel?
That's a great question. I think the answer is yes and no. I think going back to the essence of it, right, is what you were alluding to, when a clinical trial is put together, right? I hate to say it, but whether it's pharma or researchers, we put it together in such a way that we're likely to get a positive result.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
it's skewed to some degree.
That is because, and to be clear to the listeners who aren't pharmacy based, that is because it is very challenging. That the margins to get a
Very
drug
much
approved
so.
are so razor thin, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and these trials happen in a vacuum as well. And
Right.
you have to do it that way to keep it clean. So
Right.
that's another challenge.
Right.
Sorry to jump in.
No,
there.
that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
great point.
Yeah.
And when we get a trial result and it's enough, as we're all alluding to get a drug approved, a lot of people will think, okay, it's FDA approved, it's good. It's good to use, it's safe to use, without digging into the details. And and clinicians are even guilty of this. Pharmacists, luckily, we're trained to dig into that to say, really, how effective is this and where exactly does it fit? But most clinicians don't do that. And to be respectful to them, they don't have the time.
No.
They're just not afforded those opportunities. They're not trained necessarily to rip into those clinical trials to see really what is the true benefit here and what did this get approved on.
Yeah. And we don't have the time. Like when I was at Celgene years ago, I spoke to oncologists that would treat 60, 70, 80 patients a day. They're not practicing medicine.
No.
I mean, think of how stressed out our system is just because of that. So, and that's just a result of a stressed out system. So you see your physician, quickest way to get that patient out, drug, problem, drug. Doesn't work, another drug, right? So that's another massive issue with our healthcare system is the fact that we're so quick to prescribe because I don't think we have the time to do anything else, really.
No.
Now, will that create a problem though? Because I agree, the system is created that we're too quick to prescribe. That there's also
totally.
capitalistic forces that exist
course,
there because we
of course.
want that to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah,
But the drug companies want that to happen. So, when some a beautiful company like you guys come in and says, hey, we can take a blood test and we can figure out that this person actually doesn't need this to spend a year going down this pathway of needing this drug.
Right.
That we just know that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
People are going to be upset.
Oh, they are.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We've gotten, we've been at this for almost 3 years, 2 years really officially.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, we've talked to many pharma companies. We've talked to many health plans. We've talked to a ton of clinicians. And if we were to sit here and try to claim that everybody wanted to give us a big hug and say we're doing wonderful things and we're going to save medicine and save the world, we would be lying through our teeth. To your point, Steve, especially the pharma industry, the results or the feedback from them has been somewhat mixed.
It's been mixed.
It takes them a little while to understand what we're trying to do and to show them where it can benefit them. But the initial reaction is get out. You're putting together a product that's potentially going to limit my market share to a very specific population. And I count on that gray area to be able to get our medication out to the most patients we can, to sell the most that we possibly can, to maintain our company. The other response that we've got, from the health plans or the payers has been somewhat mixed because, again, we have a test that predicts treatment response in one of the largest drug classes of all time. And it just so happens that at this time, that class of drugs, which at one time worldwide was a $40 billion plus class of medications, is now being subject to what we call generics for those products, which we call biosimilars coming to market. Those are significantly cheaper. So if you look at response rates of those medications across all the different diseases they're approved for, only about 30% of patients will have an adequate response. And if we're ruling those out as an effective medication, are we pushing the health plans to have to pay for more expensive, newer medications because we're saying this one doesn't work?
Yeah.
It disrupts everything.
It completely does.
It disrupts dude, giddy up.
It does.
Yes.
Giddy up to that because this is what's going to change because it then forces and I say that's the reason I say giddy up is because it then forces these drug companies to get smarter.
It
You want to
does.
exist, baby?
It
Get
does.
smarter, create better
Right.
drugs, get on the same line with us,
Right.
do this, utilize our services to test these, to figure out this is even before, beforehand, before it even gets to the patient.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, we've had a few pharma companies react in that way that are a little bit more, I think, reality-based.
Yeah.
Knowing what's coming with our healthcare system and our new head of HHS, our new FDA commissioner, folks that are going to hold these companies accountable. And if there are products out there that will, with a very small degree of uncertainty,
Yeah.
predict whether or not somebody's going to respond to these treatments, why would we not be using them?
Exactly. Yeah.
Eh,
Yeah. And I feel like once they get past the initial point that you made about impacting their market share and the revenue impact, I think they see some benefit with respect to de-risking their trials, for example. So imagine if you did a clinical trial and you just did it the way you do it today, but versus having a trial with a treatment response predictor, you could hone in on the exact population that would respond to your product.
Right.
Yeah.
So it would totally de-risk design and totally de-risk.
Right.
It changes the way that we do
development,
changes the
approval.
way we do
does.
clinical
Yeah,
trials.
it really
It does.
does. And
Yeah,
why
it does.
shouldn't we be doing it?
100%.
Right.
Instead of inclusion exclusion criteria,
Yeah.
now it's based on a blood test.
Right.
Yeah.
Now it's based on a blood test that from
Right.
something that we know. Obviously, we need
Right.
to include and exclude other things as
right.
well. But now we can really get down to patients that it's going to
Exactly.
helpful for the time saved, the money saved. It's pretty incredible.
Right. And the other part of that is the financial perspective. So, moving forward, a pharma company could have a much clearer picture of what their market share is going to look like, how much the potential
predictability,
revenue
yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Because if you say, okay, I have 30,000 new patients diagnosed with this disease every year, and I'm going to get 10% of them because I know my medication works in 10% of that group, then we know what our revenue is going to be.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think I come from the pricing world. I think you can price a little higher as well because your value is a little bit more clear.
Exactly.
I mean, payers would love it, right? Because
It's
they know
true
exactly,
value-based care.
Yeah.
Right.
They know exactly what they're spending on. Okay, your product, your predictor, 10%. Okay, I can budget appropriately. Predictability is huge in the market. That's something that is unknown to the kind of the public.
Well, I want to talk about that. Can you guys, because it's something that I understood, something that I remember learning in school and remember thinking about and being like, oh, that treatment non-response. I remember that being a thing, and I was kind of like maybe a slide or two about it,
Of course, very small.
but very, very small.
Very
and
small.
I just remember thinking like, and this is because I was starting to think about industry and starting to think about going into the world of business and understanding it. I didn't understand why. Again, it was all like lisinopril and why it only works in a certain patient population, and having these arguments with my teachers and being like, why don't we study this more? Why is you say this to us? Then why do when I walk in to my retail pharmacy or I'm doing my rotation in the hospital, this patient population is on this drug?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to talk to you guys. Like, how did you explain to me more about because we're getting to getting into it now, but like about how Ignite became became the company that it did, searching for biosimilars, for treatment for TRP. Excuse me.
Yeah. I can give you the history on how we started and actually how we connected as well.
Please.
And I spent 16 years in the industry, and after doing something that long, I just needed something new. I needed a break. I needed, but I, always had the dream to start my own company. But what do you do? I mean, it's one thing. I mean, a lot of people want to start a company, but what do you do so you can be impactful and disruptive? And at the time, I was working at Alexion Rare Disease, and I saw this paper out of University of Alabama that had these physicians used AI to uncover a new indication for ketamine for this rare form of autism. And I thought it was fascinating because I'm like, this is the future. We all know that this is the future, right? And so I started thinking, okay, what if I took generics and reformulated them and take failed drugs and made them for rare indications and then I had created a nice little portfolio of products that And I started even talking to investors at the time. And it's when I eventually spoke to one of our board members, Joe Boswell, who during that call, he's like, you should reconnect with Patrick over at Lilly, over at Liquid Biosciences, because they're now a joint venture studio model, and they're doing really awesome things, and as Patrick's a guy that I've known for a bit, and a guy that I always respected, and the second you talk to him, you're like, this guy's onto something huge here.
Well, I've got a couple of podcasts and just read about him and man, wow,
he's brilliant.
Right.
Brilliant.
And we're just happy to kind of be involved with that and what he's doing, and we really believe in that. And so we reconnected, and he's like, look, I mean, we're a joint venture studio model. We have all this, tech. We're the biggest AI provider in pharma, et cetera. I'd like to work with you. And started thinking about it. I think it took me probably 24 hours to get back to him. And I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I don't know what it is yet, but I've always admired your work and what you can do. And, and then, fast forward, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a physiologist for the military, and he led me onto government grants. And he's like, oh, there's a lot of government grants for this type of work and all these things. And when I got the grants from him, it was all behavioral medicine. I mean, PTSD and substance use and behavioral depression. I mean, and that led me to Jake. I mean, who better, than Jake, arguably one of the best in the business.
Yeah, the best, I think.
I can think of better, but thank you.
So we had coffee, and I brought this idea to him, and we still really didn't know what Ignite was at the time.
No. But
I think I kind of turned his world upside down at that coffee meeting, and the rest is history. Yeah. But that's kind of the birth of it.
Yeah,
that's where it started.
Yeah, that's one way to say it, turn my world upside down. I mean, my initial reaction was bullshit. Especially coming from him, who I've known for 25 years. But we went to pharmacy school together. We got in a lot of trouble together in the past. My initial reaction was, this is too good to be true.
Exactly.
And especially the interest I had on the behavioral side with the substance use disorder discoveries that Patrick had uncovered, the PTSD biomarkers that he had uncovered.
Right.
I was just fascinated. And once I talked to Patrick, I mean, within a week, I asked to get on the phone with him. And I've never been more blown away from a professional standpoint at the amount of work that's gone into something, the just intelligence of an individual, the broad understanding and the application that he had put forth on this. And I remember the phone call. I called Claudio and I said, we are absolute idiots if we don't form a company and develop some of these things. This is where medicine is going. And there's a couple of folks who I consider myself disciples of in the medical world. One is Peter Attia, who does a lot on longevity and health span. And the other is the new FDA commissioner that's been recently named Marty McCary, who's a physician out of Johns Hopkins.
Right.
And they talk about this concept of medicine 3.0. I remember hearing one of Peter's podcasts, when we were in the middle of developing this company and going, that's exactly what we are. True precision medicine, defining the right patient, the right drug at the right time. And we now have the tools to do it. And that's been, as you can imagine, regardless of the stakeholder, a very hard thing for people to swallow and to digest.
It really is.
Is this real? Are we here? And I think we all know that we are. I mean, regardless of the type of AI and how we're applying it, the technology is available to be able to do these things. And we need to get there. The problem, again, is changing a model of healthcare.
That's right.
And pharmaceutical industry.
That's right.
That's been in place for decades upon decades that people are resistant to changing.
And we look at treatment response, to add to that.
Just incredible, by the way, just to say that, coming from, you two guys, getting together. And when Jake first told me about it, I didn't, he had mentioned your name. He said Claudio. And he said that because I should have known that when he was mentioning Claudio to me, it was you, obviously.
Yeah.
And so, so everyone
How many
knows.
Claudios do you know?
I took the words out of my mouth.
Dude, right, exactly. And so, like, and when he first said it, it didn't make the connection. It didn't in my head. And so so the audience knows I've known Claudio for 20 years, or how old am I? I'm 34. So
Something
so,
like
so
that.
yeah, so 16, 17
20
years.
20 is the number. That's a
20
good
is the number.
Yeah.
20 is a good number.
Yeah.
And so he's in my fraternity, a guy I looked up to, just the ultimate professional, the ultimate giddy up, fucking full head of hair.
This guy? This guy?
Thank you.
Okay, just making sure.
This guy, I know.
The hair part is true. At least.
Well, you know what? But a guy that I just looked up to, and that's it.
Fair enough.
Then Jake, you and our story, the audience knows that of how we became one, and so that when you told me that, and then when I put the two things together, I said, holy shit, these are like the two smartest people that I know that are doing this together. I know you guys don't think that way by yourself, but a lot of people do.
Thank you.
A lot of people do, and so two brilliant people that I know are coming together and changing medicine, and like I just said to be a part of that, like to see you guys doing it and to be doing this now, it's a giddy up.
Yeah, I mean, I have to thank him 1,000%. I mean, professionally, I would say I was somewhat lost.
Same for me.
To that degree. I mean, I personally feel a calling to work in the field of substance use disorders, and I always will. But that's a hard field to develop something. And again, I was entrepreneurial. I was trying to start my own company and develop technology and open new clinics, and it's frustrating. Working in that field is very frustrating, extremely rewarding when things go well. But, when I saw this, and again, I saw the potential to help folks on such a large scale, not only, in the substance use side, but just in medicine in general.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like, I don't believe things happen, coincidentally. I believe there is. Yeah. I believe everything happens for a reason. Yeah. And this just came to me at the perfect time. And I mean, I can't think of another period in the last 25 years that I've been more professionally energized, rewarded. Same. I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs, starting a company. But, I mean, our valleys have been few. I mean, our peaks have been a lot in the past 2 years.
I think we handle them well. But fast forward now. So we then
you have this great meeting. You guys, you get Jake's in. You guys meet Patrick.
Yeah,
and
we
so
meet
you
Patrick,
start developing the products.
And now what do we do? So we got to look under the hood.
Yeah,
and this is how it happens. But I remember this clearly. I was going to bed, and I get this email from Patrick. He's like, "Hey, just wanted to throw this at you. We have this TNF inhibitor technology. Here are the results. Here's the data around it." Literally, I'm laying in bed reading this, and having worked in direct competition against the TNF inhibitors working on Otezla back in Celgene days, I knew this space very well. I knew how massive this space was. And I didn't sleep that night. I really had a tough time sleeping because I was so energized about not only the opportunity, but then the data that supported the technology. It was 98% sensitive. I mean, just out of control accuracy. And I woke up the next day. I think I emailed Jake, and the next day I'm like, "This is it. This is what our company has to be about. It's about honing in on treatment prediction with respect to who's going to respond, not respond to therapy, and this is applicable across every therapeutic area. So think about the scalability of this; it's massive, and it also disruptive, solves a massive problem for our healthcare system. Patients, payers love it, physicians love it. Patients. I've never worked on anything that kind of hits on all three so well, and it resonates so well. Payers, physicians, patients.
Yeah. And since then, we've both had many sleepless nights because as we've gotten to know Patrick more and the work that he's done in the past decade, I mean, I believe it's over 300 projects in 80 different disease states. Yeah. We're kept up at night in a good way by what do we do next?
Right.
Because there's so much that we could possibly tackle. Yeah. I mean, the rate limiting step is always going to be money and capital. Costs money to develop these tests and bring them to market, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you guys learned about it, and TNF is, tumor necrosis factor. Tumor necrosis factor inhibitor is a drug class that we invented, probably about 10 years ago now, maybe 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, about 15.
15, yeah.
20.
Yeah, they
20,
started to
yeah.
trickle out in
Let's
my
use
early
20
career.
again.
20
Yeah.
again, yeah. I just remember them. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember learning. I forget
Yeah.
how old I am, but the monoclonal
Yeah.
antibodies. I remember that they
Right,
were a huge
right.
portion of learning
Very
about the
much so.
monoclonal antibodies and
Yeah.
learning about, Humira and Remicade, and so these help people who have, inflammatory bowel disease, people with Crohn's. However, these treatments, they don't work in everybody, right? So I want one of you guys to take me down, the pathway of what a normal person would go through when they are seeing their physician with IBD and potentially going to go on a TNF.
Yeah.
Aye.
Yeah, sure. So, we talk about that patient journey. It can be a frustrating one. And we've heard that a lot from not just clinicians, but the patients that suffer from these conditions. So, the first step is getting a diagnosis. And we talk about this class of medication. It's approved across many disease states, 8 or 9 different disease states. As you mentioned, Steve, all in the autoimmune type category. So they're all inflammatory diseases. And the first step is getting a diagnosis. And if we stay in the realm of inflammatory bowel disease, that, is usually not something we can just do a blood test with, or the physician can look at the patient and get symptoms and say, you have this. Usually requires an endoscopy, so that's kind of the first step, which is never an enjoyable, process, and or a colonoscopy.
Yeah.
Then it's the standard response that we get regardless of the disease that we're struggling or the ailment that we go to the physician with. We're going to try this. We've all heard that regardless of the condition we're going to try this and see how it goes. And as most people probably also know, we have guidelines that are set forth by academic medical centers and what we call thought leaders in these field of disease states. And they're usually physicians, sometimes nurses, advanced practitioners, pharmacists, and so forth. And they come up with what we call an expert opinion. And that is just based on their clinical experience in combination with published research that says, all right, here is the disease, here is how we should treat it, here's when you should employ these different medications. But there's always a caveat in there to say, well, you could try this, but you could also try this. So there's still a lot of gray area. It's not a stepwise approach. So again, if we stick with inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis or Crohn's fall into that category. A TNF inhibitor could be a first-line agent, okay? Or we could start with typical treatments like corticosteroids, like prednisone, or we have these older agents which are actually derivatives of aspirin, 5-acetylsalicylic acid, and so forth. But eventually most patients will hit that point of a TNF inhibitor where they need that. And again, we'll start the medication. And these aren't oral medications. These are medications that either need to be infused or they need to be injected at home, which can be an unpleasant experience for folks. And then we wait. We wait for a period of at least 6 months. Sometimes 3 months, we can take an interim look to see if people are responding. But it's still a coin toss whether or not they'll actually respond.
Right.
As we mentioned, about 70% of people don't have an adequate response. And the only true way to prove it, again, if we're sticking in inflammatory bowel disease, is to do another endoscopy, which people, again, don't like. Invasive, costs money, prep involved, not a very pleasant experience for most. And again, we don't necessarily get the result we're looking for. So when that actually happens, again, we go back to the guessing game. Some clinicians will actually even try a different TNF inhibitor.
Yeah.
Same class of medications, just a different named drug, which is kind of, counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Or they'll go on to one of these newer, what we call biological medications.
Yeah.
Entyvio is one people may have seen the commercials for. But,
Enbrel
is another great example. But,
Yeah.
again, in that
Not an
period,
IBD.
right,
Yeah.
where we're waiting for somebody to determine if they're a responder, there is disease that is potentially progressing that is irreversible. And you can't get that back.
That's
In
right.
addition, even though this is one of the largest classes of medications of all time, it still carries some significant risks. There is a black box warning about the risk of cancer, specifically lymphomas, and there's another risk of systemic fungal infections, which is why people have to get a TB test before to make sure that they're immunocompetent, to be able to receive these medications. So
Site injection reaction too.
long-winded answer.
Really annoying
right.
for people.
It's not a convenient process, regardless of how you look at it.
Yeah, and so that's 70% of people who don't need a medicine that they. The other thing too is that you provide somebody false hope, right? You're providing them with false hope.
It's a promise.
It's a promise, right? Like, hey,
promise.
this is you do this work. You inject this into your body twice a week, and and actually, is what you're saying is, hey, because we didn't decide to go down and use Ignite Biomedical's testing, we. Making you do a medically unnecessary procedure for a year, for 6 months, and that's like the first oath that we take as pharmacists is that we will not do medically unnecessary procedures. That's just like a no, and that's how we can save the most money, and have the most outcome benefit for patients.
Yeah, and that's another piece that we need to take into consideration, because if we ultimately have a test that predicts with a very high degree of accuracy whether or not it works, do you really need that second endoscopy to prove that it worked?
Right.
If somebody's telling you when they're exhibiting signs and symptoms of improvement, and we prove that this test actually does what we think it does, why would you need to go through that again? So we'd be saving the system tremendous amounts of money and saving the patients the aggravation of having to go through that again.
That's actually something we didn't think of
initially
when we were developing the story, and that actually came from one of our medical advisors. He's like, look, you could actually forego that second endoscopy to confirm response. I mean, think of the implications of that alone.
Right.
The payers are going to love it. Patients obviously are going to love it, not having to come back.
In practice, if somebody seems like they're being successful on treatment right now, they'll still do the second endoscopy?
Not necessarily.
No.
It's
not all the time.
No, not all the time. I mean, the point is the endoscopy is really the only real objective way to prove that it's working, right? So you go down, taking a picture of what, it looks like in there to make sure that it's not as inflamed as it used to be, right? There are other things you can do. There are, you can sit down and interview a patient and collect, certain responses or what we call more subjective responses of how it's working. There are tests that we can do, just certain blood tests that measure general inflammation and so forth, but the only true way to show that it's had an effect is to go down and scope somebody.
Yeah. Wow. There are other things like, C-reactive protein, frequency of bowel movements, blood and stool. There's other things that you can kind of gauge if they're responding, but to Jake's point, they're not as objective as, endoscopic response.
Are there, there's biomarkers that you guys are testing for to see if this drug is going to be effective. Will those now say we get on drug, we get on therapy, and it is successful? Would there be any benefit to redoing the blood test and seeing if the biomarkers change?
It's a great question. We don't know the answer to that yet. Yeah. We don't. We'll learn that answer as we evolve.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the other question is, does it work on patients currently on a TNF? And we don't know the answer.
This is just brilliant, right? Because we'll be able to take a point where we'll be able to go where we see this working in a patient, and then we'll be able to study stuff that's even it's going to tell us stuff to study way beforehand, stuff to look into.
That's the beauty of this from the academic standpoint. It's not a one and done test for us. It's continuing to study these different scenarios to find out exactly what this test tells us.
Yeah, and it's all about how you're expressing currently, how your RNA is expressing currently. So, for example, we get the question, well, you're testing patients that are naive to TNF. What if they're experienced? What if they've gone through a round or two of biologic therapy? Is your test relevant? And again, the answer is we don't know.
Right.
We'll figure that out as we evolve the test. There's going to be many iterations or many different tests. So certainly that's going to be an evolution of our development process
Continuous
for not only
refinement.
this test, but any test. Yeah. To get to the real answer of when and where a patient should really and what they should be on.
Is this now? I know that this. There was a press release that this you guys had success.
Our first one.
This is validated.
Yeah.
So the test works. It explain that to me a little bit deeper, because that's my understanding of it when I read the press release was that you guys you have this beautiful test that you put together to search for the RNA biomarkers that are in each individual patient via blood test.
Yeah.
You extracted, you collected blood, you ran it through, preserved that blood somehow with some type of assay, and then you then ran that against the algorithm that you guys have created and figured out what biomarkers are show are the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you got most of the pieces. Let me put them in a little bit of a different order. So, and to be absolutely clear, I mean, this was a learning process for both of us too.
Yeah,
We come from the drug development world, and the process of bringing a blood test to market is very different from a lot of aspects than a drug, and in some cases, a little bit easier. So the first step, as you were kind of alluding to, Steve, is you identify what these biomarkers are. And that's what Patrick does at Liquid. Yeah. The second step that people have to keep in mind, 90% of biomarker tests that try to kind of market fail this, okay, is this process of analytical validity. And what that is we have these biomarkers. Can we actually measure them in blood? Is it possible to measure them? Do we have the right chemicals that we can put together in a blood tube to make sure that we can measure these adequately to determine that? And that's the process, again, of analytical validity, or AV for short. And we just finished that, and that was what our press release is. And again, that's important. It's a huge milestone because 90% of tests that try to come to market fail that. They're not able to do that. The next step, and this is where it gets a little bit more similar to the drug approval process, is proving that it does what we say it does. Yeah. So using the blood test in patients that have a diagnosis of inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis or Crohn's to be specific, and testing them with the assay, as you mentioned, the blood test, and then following them out for a period of at least 3 to 6 months to determine, in those that we use the TNF in, did they have a response? And those that we tested in the blood that said they wouldn't have a response didn't have a response either. So it's another kind of clarification. Our product not just tells you who's going to respond, it tells you who's not going to respond, which is just as important. So that's where we're at now. That's kind of where we're at in the evolution of the company. We're raising money. We're in what we call our seed round right now, trying to raise $10 million because that's about what it's going to cost us to do this clinical trial. We need, around 900 patients to be able to study this in. And again, we're in the process of working with organizations that can put together this study, bring us those patients, and collect the result that we're expecting to see. Yeah. That's called clinical validation.
Yeah, that's the next step is clinical validation, that's doing it in patients. And it feels like, blood tests, are they usually quicker than drug development and stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, much quicker. This whole process, I mean, if you take discovery's quick. I mean, that was, in this case, it was already on the shelf. But Liquid's process, for example, for discovery, 60 days max, right? They can uncover the biomarkers if they have the right data, to discover the biomarkers. Analytical validation, 9-10 months, clinical validation, a little bit longer, 1.5 years. The whole process is about, less than 3 years?
Yeah.
And there are other things that you need to do. And interesting part about this process that we learned as well, there's actually a price negotiation aspect to this as well with the government. So you get crosswalked from current technology, and you get a baseline price, when you get your clinical validation data. And then once you submit your full package, you can negotiate a higher price with a Z code. So it's a little bit different. And I was pleasantly surprised and happy that was the process, because there's less pushback when you commercialize. Like, look, this has been negotiated with the government. Yeah. Right. So I feel like that process, we welcome that process because, again, I come from the drug pricing world. That needs to change. We'll get into that if you want. But certainly, again, I think we were pleasantly happy with that. That was included in the process of
the other
sounds like it's incredible, Claudio. It sounds like that's another way to do real medicine for people, to give them the best value-based care that we possibly can.
And everybody understands the price and the value of it.
Right.
And And of course, there are things that will work in, contracting wise and pricing wise to make sure that it's not only clinically valuable, but obviously
Commercially
financial,
valuable.
right?
Sure.
For the sites, as we all know, they make money off these things. So there are things that we have to work in there, but there's plenty of leg room to work.
Yeah,
on
the process is obviously significantly shorter.
Yeah.
And it's also different in the fact that you don't have to get an approval by the FDA to be able to sell the test.
That's right.
We are certainly going to do that because we want that stamp of approval. But the regulatory process is different. And to Claudio's point, there are milestones along the way to that FDA clearance, as we call it, that we can actually start selling this test. We have decided to hold off on doing that until we actually have some of that clinical validation data to prove that it works. We don't believe in going out there and selling a test going, we think it does this, but we're not absolutely sure. So, you can use it. We don't want to be that company. We never will be that company.
I think that's the pharmacist in you, right? Like
of course
the
it
back.
is. Of course it is.
Yeah,
It is.
100%.
But it's also transparency. Like, we believe in transparent science and data. So what's the point of
That's the pharmacist in you is
bet it
talk
is.
to you like, dude, the only way that for it to be transparent and for you
Right.
to be able to dig as deep as possible into it and get the outcome and get the information that you want
Right.
from it.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me to commercialize something like this, but then not give the physicians who will be utilizing the test all the information they need to use it appropriately.
Right.
That's the
You
point.
could do it
I
you could do it a quick way, and some people would do it in a quick way because most do,
and
right?
That's not the right way. According, I don't think we think it's the right way.
We don't.
No, so there are competitors on the market. You guys had mentioned that there's 98% of people have failed, but there's other people who are trying to do this, or
Yeah, yes and no.
Yeah.
To our knowledge, we don't know anybody else that has a platform that's anywhere close to what Patrick has at Liquid. A lot of the AI development out there is what we call quantitative or generative AI, and it involves basically informing the model, educating the model before you run it. The key difference with our discoveries through Patrick is that we don't pre-inform the model. It's agnostic to anything. So there's no skewing the data.
There's no bias.
It's a clear outcome
Yeah.
that doesn't take anything previously into effect. So from an AI perspective, that's where we're different. From a competitor perspective, there is another product out there that does measure TNF inhibitor response rates in patients specifically with rheumatoid arthritis. But it's a little different. The accuracy is very different than ours, meaning it's not as sensitive and specific as we like to say. And not only does it require a blood test, it requires the clinician to collect some clinical markers. So BMI, patient factors, and so forth, which is a little bit more cumbersome. At least that's what the opinion of other clinicians that we've surveyed around this. Most would like to get a blood test, get a binary result of yes, this is going to work in my patient, or no, it's going to work, not going to work, and be able to move forward.
Yeah.
I think that's actually the only way, because when you, not that there shouldn't be, the physician should always be able to prescribe how they see fit, and if they think that this drug could potentially work in a patient, even though they're not seeing this, this biomarker test, successful for whatever reason, because they placebo, they think it's gonna, whatever. I don't, they should be able to have that agency.
Yeah.
But it by making it yes or no and making it by taking away a lot of that gray area, then that limits that, because you actually don't want you want as little of that as possible. You want, if the drug works, and if it doesn't, the patient doesn't get it.
Right. Yeah, you're just further muddying the waters when you have a test that's supposed to clarify a question and it actually doesn't.
Right.
And we like to call it imprecision.
Yeah,
medicine,
it's exactly
that's
exactly
what's
what it is.
existing now, right? I'm not saying this particular test is imprecision, but I am saying the current practice is imprecision. No. But it again doesn't make sense to me. It never made sense to me that we would launch and approve and commercialize a test that's not accurate. So it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. We know what we're doing,
right?
And accuracy and transparency are top of mind all the time when we talk about this, when our discovery process, when we're talking to our partners. That's paramount. That needs to
always
be
will
paramount.
be.
Yeah, that needs to be paramount.
Now, do you guys, do you see a place where this is going, where because with TNF, it's very that seems to be we're going to be able to show proof of concept, and this is really going to work in this disease state, and it's a huge disease disruption market to go into. They're only a 20-year-old drug class, but they're still making quite a bit of money. The market share is still massive.
Yeah.
I know that most of us associate the weather getting chilly with flu and cold season, but here at Dr. BeeWell, we call it bad sugar season. As Americans, we generally eat like shit. During this time of year, with the holiday and other related stresses, those horrible eating practices tend to get kicked into overdrive. We offer a solution in the form of full-spectrum RSO infused raw local honey because we shouldn't be walking around eating nerd rope all day. Why not let the bees handle the heavy lifting that your sweet tooth demands? I think it's fair to say that most people know how vital strength training is for long-term health and fitness, but find it hard knowing where to start. I'm here to say that also included me, Dr. Steve. You want to make sure you're doing exercises correctly, you don't want to get hurt, and you have no idea how to structure a workout program to get the best results. I've been there. In fact, this is where I found myself a few months ago. That's where On Target Fitness comes in. At On Target, every client gets their own custom strength program, tons of individual attention in their unique small group format, and the common sense nutrition and health coaching necessary to make a lasting lifestyle upgrade. As a new member of On Target, I'm not only seeing major changes in my body, but also my overall quality of life. In the past, I've struggled with using proper form. Well, let me tell you, whether it's Coach Joe or Coach Ryan, they've got you covered with technique. Even movement patterns as simple as walking have improved since I've started. When I was working out by myself without a program, I was often lost and lacked the motivation to challenge myself. Not at On Target. The energy and support in the group dynamic is truly game-changing. I have so much fun every time I work out. If you're ready for lasting change, don't hesitate to schedule a complimentary strategy session at www.ontargetfit.com. During this session, you'll learn a lot, make a plan, and only move forward if it's right for your budget, schedule, and goals. I met with Coach Katie, and she was awesome. So please, if you need that giddy up back in your life, get on over to ontargetfit.com and schedule your session today.
The way that the test is designed now is you guys are you able to share because you say it's agnostic, are you able to share what might go into finding what type of data goes into the system to figure out these biomarkers, to figure out the RNA biomarkers?
Yeah, I mean, it's just full genomics data, so RNA. You can use some of the common RNA sequencing platforms like Affymetrix and a lot of the common data sets that are out there, but a lot of the public data sets through the NIH have that embedded in it. So as long as you have full genomics and you have the result of interest, it's like putting a puzzle together. Yeah. So all we're doing is, first off, we're saying, look, somebody's not responding, there has to be a reason. And we're just locating that reason. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We know as pharmacists that, 30 people take a drug, we have 30 different reactions, 30 different responses, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're finding that common place, that common algorithm, the common biomarkers that dictate from person to person what that result could look like in the real world. So that's what we're finding that reason. We're locating those puzzle pieces, putting it together, and the algorithm uncovers the biomarkers of interest and their mathematical association, and that's what we use to develop the tests.
Right, and there's an important distinction there. Sometimes we get lumped into the bucket of being just another company that's making genetic tests. And exactly. For your listeners to understand the difference between a genetic test and what we're doing. So, there's a lot of genetic tests out there, and the best way I can describe the difference is to give an example. So, in my family, most of us have the gene for substance use disorder or addiction. Okay. I am one of two. I developed a substance use disorder. My sister did not. We would both test positive, likely, for that gene for substance use disorder. When you get an actual disease, when that disease is activated by whatever factor in the environment, that gene is turned on and it starts making proteins and messenger RNA. And that's when you measure that in the blood, it tells you the presence or the absence of a disease. Yeah. And it's the same thing with treatment response. The presence or the absence of these proteins in the blood tells you the actual real-time scenario of what is going on. Yeah. The genetic presence just presents a risk,
Yeah.
a marker of risk. And of course, there are certain diseases, cystic fibrosis is an example, where if you have a certain gene, you have the disease. But it's usually rare disease.
Yeah.
But for the most part, just measuring genetic markers just tells you there's a risk.
Right.
Ours tells you the actual disease activity. We're measuring disease activity to be able to come up with these treatment response predictors and, eventually some of these diagnostic biomarkers.
So that's the difference. And that's why you see a lot of companies, to your question, a lot of companies out there that are doing genetic testing.
Yeah.
And Patrick always uses this example. I try to do my best to give the example, but he uses the F1 example, where if you have genetics is how the F1 car is built, type of tires, how fast it might go,
Engine.
but it won't tell the engine, maybe how it handles, but it won't tell you how it's going to do in the race today against 30 other cars in the rain or whatever the conditions may be. So if you look at, your fancy cameras and all the equipment in the pit, those are your biomarkers. Those are your today biomarkers, looking at the race, looking at all the different, biomarkers of the race to figure out, okay, against Jake's car, I'm going to burn him around the corner. Against your car, I'm going to, we got to pit faster, and they'll collect that information to make real-time decisions. That's RNA. That's what we're doing. And that's the massive difference, I think, between genetics and RNA is, again, both are important, but it depends on what you're looking at.
Exactly.
This is like so revolutionary to me, because I was in school and just after school and just the way that I've thought about pharmacogenomics being like the next step, right? But I couldn't make the connection to as how it was. But the thing that I always remember, and the biggest thing about like DNA and RNA that I understand is that it helps to express protein. It's all expression, and what we're doing when we're moving. We're expressing, our DNA is expressing so we can move, protein can move our body, physically move our body into any type of expression that we have. And so the fact that we're going to be able to study that and to know exactly what's happening in expression in real time.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Are there going to be systems that that take the data that you guys then get? Have you thought about this, where you're taking the data that you're retrieving and having some other AI system put it in so that we can get different outcomes that are going to tell us?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that. I think that's inevitable. There are, again, we think we're the only ones, and Patrick at Liquid, the only ones doing it the way that we're doing it now. At the rate in which this is moving, there will be others that come along.
I hope there's others.
We hope to go.
Really hope there's others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
we're not going to solve this without others.
We would welcome people
Yeah.
challenging our algorithms. We would love people to validate our data. Because, again, our process of discovery is, again, identifying these biomarkers and then validating them against other data sets. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We would love for people to do the same thing because we're that confident that we have something here. Yeah.
And it's interesting. So if we back up to before the development process, when we look at our discovery data, this is also unique where it was discovered on one data set and then validated 8 times over. And the chances that validation validated at 8 additional times is 1 in quadrillion. So that's why we're, again, super confident that these biomarkers will work. You have a better chance of hitting the lottery than these biomarkers failing. And again, anything can happen in clinical validation. Anything can happen. That's clinical development. But the discovery data gives us extreme confidence that we're onto something here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you might. I think you're onto more. I think you guys already know this because you've lost many nights to sleep. But it's something that's way even bigger than what we're talking about with just the blood test and this is going to explode precision medicine and explode the way that we treat patients. Now, what are just the money cost, like you said, Claudia, I do want to, before we move on to the question, I do want, you say that, you have a lot of experience with drug pricing and how that's a huge problem. Yeah. And so and how this is, could you just speak to that, about how drug pricing is an issue and how, or it's a mess and needs a little bit of help?
Yeah. And I think, I think companies are within their right to price where they want, but I think what you're seeing now is a lot of Medicaid states and a lot of governments, state governments and federal government folks coming to the table and say, you got to show your value. So price increases, where you price, you have to submit documentation now to support that price. And I think that's a better practice. Yeah. And I wouldn't necessarily point the finger only at the drug companies. So that's the other thing. So a lot of people make money off drugs. So when we're looking at drug pricing, I have an example of where we priced a drug, actually in this space, we'll mention the drug. It was clinically the same. It was oral versus subcutaneous, no black box. And so we go ahead and think, okay, let's price less expensive. Let's make it a no-brainer. Let's price it less expensive, and everybody's going to use it. Yeah. In fact, it was actually the opposite. We couldn't give this thing away. Think about that. So we had a drug that was equally efficacious, oral, easy to use, and we priced it lower, and we could not move it in the market because of the contractual agreements in the space and the way that the incentives work in our healthcare system that allow the more expensive drugs to be used. Think about it. You're a clinic, and you're making money off of a drug. That margin matters to you. So you have two drugs. Do I use the one that I make $300 or do I use the one that I make $0? Yeah. If they're the same clinically, as a businessman or woman, you're going to use the one that makes you $300 per infusion versus the one that's not getting. Plus, it's pharmacy versus infusion. So you get nothing on the pharmacy side because you're giving that to a pharmacy. So there's so many dynamics there. I wouldn't just point the finger at the pharmaceutical companies. It's the whole system. Yeah. So the system is driven by incentives.
It's incentive based.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. I mean, we've always pointed the finger at pharma.
Yeah.
And I think now, and I'm grateful for this, the role of the pharmacy benefit managers, the PBMs in all of this is coming to light. And there are lawsuits, against them for these types of things. But again, it just goes back to, in my mind, the whole system is broken. Yeah. To your point, Steve, you said it's incentives. It's all based on incentives, regardless of who the stakeholder is.
It really is.
And we really need to take a deep look at that.
Yeah. And think about this too. So manufacturer, pharmaceutical company, the drug leaves your facility. Every time it changes hands, there's an increase in price. So a wholesaler gets it, now it's 20% more expensive.
Right.
And again, you can always point back to the company because they set the initial price, but every touch point along the way, that price point changes. And then it doesn't always communicate with the reimbursement price.
Right.
So the best pricing practice that I've experienced is you have to literally go through the channel, every channel of trade and say, all right, I'm shipping here, patient's getting here. Who's going to touch this? What price increases are going to happen? What do we have to tell the payers the reimbursement point should be for everybody to be in the black? If anybody's in the red, the whole thing goes south.
That's how the exercise works, right?
Yeah, and then people don't use it. We've had this is especially relevant in oncology. So community oncology, infusion, they make a lot of money on this, and they should. There's chair time, there's all these things come into play. But the issue is there again, you have to have a good pricing team because you're literally competing against other chemos or other agents that have the same mechanism, the same clinical result, maybe different patient to patient, but we don't know that. But the price point is different. So they do the math at the clinic, and suddenly they're like, well, we're not going to use this drug anymore because we're making $500 here, we're making $200 there. And that's the incentive system that we've created, and it is what it is. Yeah. That now we have to play within that system.
Do you guys have any any solutions to how to fix that problem?
I mean, I don't think it's one thing. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that need to be unraveled and a lot of issues with the system that we built. I mean, we built the system, so now we got to play in the system. Certainly something to think about is what we're doing at Ignite and alleviating the pressure of treatment non-response and the effects of treatment not having any response for people, which is, again, $1 trillion problem. we could take that $1 trillion, imagine taking that $1 trillion of waste and putting it into prevention or putting it into another area of healthcare. That would be huge, right? So I think that's the beginning of it, and I think another aspect of it, and Steve, we talked about this briefly, it's taking back our healthcare system one person at a time, taking control of your own health. I mean, as pharmacists and clinicians, we hope that, when we give instruction to patients, they go home and take the medication appropriately, or they follow instruction appropriately. Well, that's up to them if they want to take their medication. And it goes along those lines where we have to then, as individuals, take control back of our own health. Yeah. And I think those small wins, coupled with maybe some major things coming out of our shop and again, other folks that are alleviating some of this pressure, I think that's eventually how we eat away at this problem. It's not just one lever and suddenly we're like, oh, voila, everything's solved.
Yeah.
Right.
To that point, I mean, again, it's not just pharmaceutical companies, it's not just PBMs, it's not health plans, it's everybody.
Everybody.
And I think the first step in kind of untangling this is transparency. I think, and I'm hopeful our new administration will come in and start to do some of these things. But looking at each of those stakeholders and seeing, to your point, what the role is, from all the way from the top of pharmaceutical manufacturers and government payers down to the patient. And really kind of aligning the personal incentives around somebody's health. Again, I like that term you said, taking back our healthcare system. Because, again, it starts with us as patients.
But transparency is key.
Absolutely.
It really is key. It's key on pricing, too.
Right.
Where for a while we didn't know the admin fees that were being paid on prescriptions. We didn't know the incentives. And a lot of these things just haven't been transparent. And I think transparency in general is needed, and not just with pricing and with data, with science, and
I think with anything that's regarded with our health. Anything that we're doing, it needs to be fully transparent and giving us as much information. No hidden, nothing's hidden. Everything's cards are all on the table.
Right.
Things are given to us in an easily digestible way. That I am excited about the new administration, and like Claudio, people need to take back their health, and they need to, but they also need to be empowered to do that. And so I think that's what something like Ignite is doing, is empowering them.
That's the other thing. And I think, like, just like anything else, like you have a pipe broken, you call a plumber. Why are call an electrician? We're so dependent on other people. So it's like I believe that's like that with medicine, where you have an ailment, you have a problem. Oh, don't worry, modern medicine will cure. My doctor will cure it. And nobody goes into their yearly checkups anymore. Nobody does preventative medicine. Nobody does those measures. And then all of a sudden they're dependent on the healthcare system, and it's too late most of the times. So I think that mentality and I think we need to drive that as well. And I know, Steve, that's where you come in with what the work that you're doing. But I think prevention is one of the key pieces here. And it speaks to some of the stuff that we're doing. I like to say that with Ignite, it's more proactive, practicing proactive medicine, better informed medicine.
Anytime that you can avoid a medically unnecessary procedure, that's a giddy up. That's saving money. That's saving chances of adverse reactions.
So it's connected.
It's absolutely connected, man. And I think that people really do need to. And there needs to be. I spend a lot of my time thinking about this. How do we create? And sometimes it's as simple as like just telling people, being honest and transparent with people about what is good for them in their food.
Sure.
And marketing to them in a fair and true way. The same thing with our drugs. The same exact thing.
Totally, man. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think we went ketogenic.
Yeah.
Not to bring that up, but that's
right.
It's because of the food.
Right. I went to my yearly checkup in March, and I was pre-diabetic.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm fairly healthy, and I was pre-diabetic. My doctor looked at me or called me afterwards and said, look, everything else is normal, but come back with this result again next year. We're going to have to start doing something. And I don't want to be on medication, so what could I have done? This is kind of my shot of trying to, keep that at bay.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I've been doing it for 3 months, and I feel fantastic. And I encourage people to kind of take control of their health and really look at what they're putting in their bodies and depend on the healthcare system a bit less, but I think we're too dependent on, hey, problem physician drug.
We're trained
doesn't
this
work.
way.
We are
It's-
trained
And
this way.
it's too
Yeah.
much. It creates
pain.
unwarranted. It's
We
too
got to
much.
learn to be uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
things. The only way is through. And so, like when I say this, I have a good story that I tell. And so, my mom, God bless her soul, she was a nurse, and she's a trained nurse, and so allopathic medicine, traditional medicine, but our medicine was the way that she always was gonna, So from a young age, if I had a headache, if I had anything wrong with me, or specific, my head hurts. Here's some Advil.
Yep.
Exactly. Here's 800 milligrams of Advil.
Yeah.
What's your weight,
Yeah.
Stevie?
Yeah.
Oh, you're at this now. Here's 800 milligrams of Advil.
There you go.
Yeah, here you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. Here's some
Yeah.
Tylenol 3. Here's some Advil. Whatever you need.
Yeah.
She thought that she was doing the best. It's what she was learned, what she was literally taught to do this.
Yeah.
I now, like, for me to have to take an Advil, oh my God. Like I have to be in a lot of pain, dude. I have to be in like a lot of pain, and I have to be feeling really bad. And then guess what? And then I take like 200 milligrams, maybe 400 milligrams, and I feel awesome. And the medicine works. It does what it's supposed to do. And I'm grateful to it. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Not the guy who used to be taking 800 milligrams on just because he had a headache because he was studying. And it's like, oh no, it's just like, maybe go outside and get some fresh air, get some water, do some stretching, eat some good food.
Yeah.
Like I was forced to learn this about myself because otherwise I was going to die. My body wouldn't have, I would have just given out, or would have, gone down the drug path or whatever. It just, my body wouldn't have made it. So I was forced to learn how to do this preventative medicine. And like, I'm super grateful for it because I'm a 34-year-old person, and I have these skills that I've had to force myself to go through. And then when I went through it, and I realized like, oh shoot, I can heal my body with physical movement. I can heal emotional pain with physical movement. All the stuff that I learned, I wanted to teach people and explore this as much as I could. I thought more people would be able to get on board right away and see it, and that's when I realized the incentives are broken.
Yeah. Very much.
Yeah, totally.
Just like my mom learned, right? Like just like my mom was taught this stuff, and she was taught that this was the best because she saw the commercials, and she was taught this in school. Opposed to like when the pharmacy schools in the future, I want them to make sure that everyone has not just an elective for nutrition. No, you need to take a nutrition class, and it's a part of every single
part of the
disease
curriculum.
state. Exactly, it's a part of every single disease state that it's applicable to, which is almost every single one. They all start in the gut, and so. That's what I'm hopeful of that. I'm hopeful that the food pyramid changes, and that all this stuff that we were taught that we thought was good, and that we get the corporate interest, the bad corporate interest out of the medicine, out of healthcare, and we get the good corporate interest, people who want to make difference, people who want to make change. Something what sounds like what you guys are absolutely doing. Wanting to bring people value-based care.
Right.
But how excited that gets me?
Yeah.
The fact that people can know that I might have to work really hard and pay for my insurance and do this, but if I do this, I'm going to be taken care of. Things are going to be okay. Things are going to be good. I'm going to get an honest assessment of what's going on. Like that's everything, and that will change the world.
Yeah, it goes back to me, at least in my mind, too. You're bringing up a really good point of what the individual's role is in this, and you have to take an active role in wanting to change.
That's right.
And the example I always think of is, we talk about more transparency, and I think food labels are a great example, right? Over the past 5-10 years, the transparency around what's in our food has been excellent. There's more on the labels.
Yeah.
And I make it an issue anytime I'm in a grocery store to notice how many people are actually reading those labels. I don't see many.
No.
I don't see many.
No,
you
not
see
at all.
some.
Yeah.
But not as many as I would expect to see. Yeah. So I think it's your mom's example is a great one, regardless of what's medication or food. We've become complacent with how we operate.
Yeah.
And it's hard to break out of that.
Yeah, it really
we talked
is.
about this when we talked on the last time about addiction and getting help and taking that active role in your own recovery. That's a very big part of it. You have to want to make that change, and it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, but it's also lifestyle. I mean, people are asked
No
to do
question.
more.
Right.
And I
Ding, ding.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Stress is a killer. And stress affects your sleep. Sleep affects your immune system affects disease.
Look at our profession.
It's all connected.
Right.
And I
Not around your families because
Right.
we all
Nope.
live in different
Right.
places.
Right.
We're not around our friends because we
Nope.
all live in different places. We're
Nope.
stressed out, working way
Exactly.
too much. It's definitely designed that. So let's fix that too.
yeah, before COVID, I was commuting into the city an hour and a half, 2 hours one way.
Yeah.
Think of that. 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The amount of stress I had. Hey, so that went away after COVID. COVID hit. Now I'm working from home. I feel fantastic.
Yeah.
Right?
The hair
I'm not
show-
in
the-
my
the-
car
the hair-
10,
the hair
12
looks
hours.
it too.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So I'll never go back. I can't do that again because I knew it was affecting my mental, my physical capacity. Couldn't do that anymore. And that was another driving factor, behind wanting to
Change
go out
your,
and do it right. And
change
doing
your life,
something.
change your dude. And Claudio too, like you in that same time, you became a dad to some wonderful kids and stuff too. So that stuff changes too. Now it's more about legacy and it's more about like what can I do? How can I leave this world? And
and you spend and that mental capacity and awareness and wherewithal matters. Like to your point, like do you want to be in a car for 3 hours a day or you want to be at home with your kids? I'd hope the latter is the answer. So before I wasn't getting that. So I knew in my gut, I'm like, I need to change. My career needs to change. Mentally, I can't do this physically. Now, you spend an hour at the gym instead of in the car.
Yeah.
You spend an hour with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And an hour with the kids, an hour at the gym versus 2 hours in a car.
Right. And
way better.
Way better. And two, so this is, they need to, like when people talk about like changing the world and it's all about the incentives and changing that for people. And so like giving them a chance to earn money, because money is in a very big incentive. So like if you're healthy, guess what? You're going to earn money and not like these bullshit programs that exist now. Like you can really earn money back on your healthcare if you are healthy. Show people that that's a thing that you can do. If you do go where like the thing too is like, pay, I know HSAs exist and they're great, and if you can utilize them, let's teach people how to utilize them. But let's educate people on it specifically, and also let's open it up. Let's make sure that businesses can accept all of this different payment. Like you should be able to go to any yoga studio that you want, any gym that you want. If it's not the one community gym that is covered by your HSA. No, any type of thing. And give people, the housing situation needs to get better for a lot of folks, so they can have a little bit more stability.
Social determinants.
The social determinants. Exactly, the social determinants. But if you create a system where people are feeling healthier, and that can start with the food and with the medicine, then we can immediately start to see huge changes.
Absolutely.
And you alluded to rewarding them for those behaviors as well.
Right.
And there is a
That's right.
great model that we already have in addiction medicine treatment called contingency management, where we reward people for positive behaviors. It's not paying people to stay clean, it's rewarding them for positive behaviors. And not only is that reinforcing, but you from a physiological standpoint, you get a little bit of a dopamine burst, a pleasure chemical from that. It's reinforcing.
Yeah.
Hey, this behavior was positive. It made a good outcome. I'm going to do it again. And it just continues to snowball from there.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, as you would imagine, starting a company, we're going through planning for benefits for our employees. And, right? I mean, we have to literally do everything and set it.
Of course.
And the discussions are great with our HR team because essentially what we're focused in on is keeping people happy and engaged and healthy. That's priority. I mean, who are we to be a healthcare company and then treat our employees like garbage or not give them the benefits they need? People have their lives. I mean, work, to be honest, work is second. You have your families, you have your own lives.
Yeah.
And if you take that mentality, people are happier. They work more for you. They work better for you. They can still do the work. We're all adults. We're all professionals, right? At the end of the day, let's give people what they need.
Yeah.
And in return, they'll give you their best.
That's it. Get a little bit uncomfortable by providing people with some accountability. Hey, this is what we're accountable to.
That's it.
Just let's get it done together.
Draw the line.
Draw the line.
Draw the line.
Simple and provide them. That's so cool that you guys are doing it to that extent as well. That you're not just because a lot of people they would say it off of one mouth and say it out of this side of their mouth.
Exactly.
And then turn around and treat their employees like shit and be running. And there's so many companies that are like that I know of. And
Most.
So many companies. I work for a startup in breast cancer, and the CEO had a really great benefit. They paid 100% for all your healthcare benefits. 100%. So if you paid anything out of pocket, you submit a receipt, they pay it back.
Well,
I thought it was great. And his statement was like, we're a healthcare company. How can we not provide this to our employees? We're a healthcare company. And that stuck with me because I always thought that was a great thing.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, we are a healthcare company. So let's look at it from a healthy perspective. let's not take and do the same thing and incorporate something from a system that frankly is broken.
Yeah, we spend so much. We already are spending the money on it. That's the whole thing. It really is just about reallocation. And like when you can take that from like people, when you realize it, you're like, oh, it's not going to affect me if we save this $1 trillion from, and of course it will. Of course it will. It's going to, everything is going to change in healthcare if we can eliminate waste, if we can eliminate inefficiency and create trust through transparency. People will start to take control of their own health. We'll have different models that exist that where people can be they can educate themselves a little bit differently, and it exists out there. And it's very convoluted right now. It's
very much
gate kept.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, I mean, it's going to take a while to get there, obviously, but again, the transparency around this, giving people the tools to be able to make those decisions is a hell of a start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. But it does. This is a topic where I think it goes outside of healthcare, because we're talking about how we source our food and how we put in our bodies, how we act and treat our own bodies. Again, the stress levels, and we don't prioritize a lot of the things that really impact our health. Water, sleep, exercise, all these things that we should be prioritizing, and we don't, because again, there are 1,001 other things going on in a day, or you got, kids running around, you got work, or you have, so many other, and I think we all need to prioritize our physical and our mental health to get to a very good place as we control our own health. That's really where it starts. And I think we really encourage, and I think you as well, Steve, we encourage people to do that, and we hope that for people. And that's one of the driving forces behind what we're doing is, again, we want to put technology out in the commercial space that improves health, informs physicians and helps them practice better and gives patients and people better results and eliminates waste to the system. And that's really at the nucleus what we're all about.
It's pretty unique that two pharmacists, people who are, constantly in
We've
drug
heard that
development.
before.
Yeah, constantly in drug development, constantly in trying to figure out what's the new discovery, what drugs can we use. And you guys here are developing a blood test that's going to, potentially, just change the way that we interact with drugs.
Right. Yeah, it's going to make it more efficient, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, again, and that's the goal is not to have to expose people to medications that aren't going to provide any benefit, put them at risk of side effects, and ultimately cost the system money. Yeah. I mean, and ultimately, that's what it boils down to. It's not, as we say, it's not rocket science. The technology is now available to be able to develop these tools, and, we're going to do so.
Yeah. And, early in the process, I had coffee with somebody in this space, and she asked me the question, what's your vision? And my immediate reaction was, well, I want to fix all of it. And I know that's not realistic, right? But I think that's kind of something that we think about. Like, we're going to continue pushing and solving one problem at a time until we, either get there or encourage others to join the fight, or, something else comes along that's better, that, does a better job or gets us to a better space. So that's our long-standing vision, is to keep producing and commercializing these assets to make the practice of medicine better and to improve outcomes and eliminate waste.
Yeah.
And it starts with the TNF inhibitors. That's where you guys have gotten started with with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis.
Yeah.
But where so I know there's a ton of other applications in this, and I want to know where if you guys could bring me through a couple other examples, I would think that'd be great value.
Yeah. So as you kind of alluded to, the TNF inhibitor treatment response predictor is what we're calling our foundational asset. It's the first that we're bringing to market. It is the most mature in terms of being validated by Liquid Biosciences. So we have a lot of faith in the discovery data. The end goal within any franchise or with any disease state that we're working on is for you to be able to go to a clinician, get a diagnosis of a disease, and then run a single blood test, which will come back with results to say you're going to respond to these medications and you're not going to respond to these medications. So as I said, this is our foundational asset, but we're going to layer on the other products within this space so eventually we can get to that final product where you will know at the diagnosis of your disease at that point which medications are going to work for you.
Yeah.
And again, there are 9 different FDA-approved indications for TNF inhibitors. It's 9 different disease states that we're going to do that in. So there's a long pipeline that we have and a long lifespan for that asset, or the life cycle of that asset, as we call it in the industry, is pretty long. We've always seen the company as having 2 divisions, a medical division and a behavioral health division. Obviously, the inflammatory disease portfolio falls under our medical division. Under our behavioral division, we've currently acquired intellectual property for substance use biomarkers. And we don't want to give away too much quite yet, but we can't. But we've Patrick has done the discovery work on discovering biomarkers that are related to substance use disorders in a few different domains. So opioid use disorder, alcohol use disorder, stimulant use disorder, and cannabis use disorder, to name a few. Where we are now is refining those results to determine what we really think we have. And that's why, again, we don't want to make any definitive statements around what it is, but it will definitely be of value in determining which patients have substance use disorders and which patients don't. There's still a lot of questions remain, and it goes back to the point we're making about researching the other applications of these tests. So let's say we do end up having some sort of a diagnostic for substance use disorder. Well, if you ran that test in me, would I still test positive 15 years into my recovery? Would you test positive? We don't know the answers to those questions. So again, these are some of the things that we're figuring out. But we have a whole plan for a medical division, a whole plan for a behavioral division. Some other things we're interested in that, again, to be clear, we don't have IP in quite yet, but Patrick has done work in, is PTSD. He's got some incredible potential biomarkers for treatment decisions as well as diagnosing certain forms of PTSD. We're looking at major depressive disorder and anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. So many things have been brought to the table. And again, we've had many sleepless nights of in a very good way of thinking about where we could go next. We have actually a big planning meeting coming up in January. We're all going to get together out in California at Liquid and decide exactly what that portfolio is going to look like. But bottom line is we got big plans.
Yeah, and that extends to immunology as well. So the TNF inhibitor response test is IBD first, to your point, Steve, and we're going to layer on RA, psoriasis, and all the other indications as well. We're actually talking to, just due to the press release Tuesday, received a note from a friend of ours in the industry that's in one of those indications and very interested in our technology. So, that's great. Maybe we'll develop something earlier than we thought. That's just going to organically happen. But after that, to Jake's point, we can't stop at just TNF because then we're just leaving everybody in the same spot they are today. The vision for any of these diseases is to look at the problems, right, and assess, okay, here are the first 4 products in the treatment landscape. They use these products first. This is where physicians make decisions first. Here's where physicians make decisions second. Let's solve these response issues. And it could be diagnostic too.
Right, exactly.
It could be diagnostic or prognostic. It could be those issues. And by taking those solutions, those problems and creating solutions, we're becoming patient-focused, not product-focused. We're bringing, technology to market to solve a problem, a patient-physician problem. We're not bringing a product to market and then retrofitting it to the market. So that's the difference in Ignite as well, and that's why we say we're patient-focused and not product-focused.
Right.
Okay, so you will with substance use disorder, that's amazing that you'll be able to tell that there's even potential for that.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
that there's even a potentiality for that because it's Now, could you?
huge.
Yeah, it is huge.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's huge. But it's also I don't think people will know right off like what the benefit of that
Yeah.
could be.
Of course.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a good thing to just discuss. Like
Yeah.
what is like what
Sure.
because most people would think if I have a drug problem or an alcohol problem,
Yeah.
I know, or
Yeah.
I, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
That's a great point. And again, there'll be a lot of studies done to
Yeah.
figure out exactly what that means. But some of the applications that we're thinking, again, if this really holds up in the long run, I think the first and most important in our eyes is reduction of stigma. If we're able to have a blood test that suggests that you have a true substance use disorder, it'll help people get past the idea of it's a matter of willpower and it's not a disease, which we still fight every day. Every one of us that work in this field fights this every day. So to me, that's kind of the first piece. Where we eventually want to go with it is where we would go with all of our assets is, what's the right drug to treat that substance use disorder? And in many cases, we don't have any FDA-approved medications. But if we take opioid use disorder, for example, where we'd eventually like to end up is you get a diagnosis of opioid use disorder, is methadone, buprenorphine, or naltrexone the best choice for you? Because right now it could be any of the three. There really isn't a guideline out there that says, well, this type of patient gets this one, this type of patient gets this one. I mean, we have some good expert opinions around that, but we don't know for sure. And we're hoping we'll be able to solve some of those issues. So, again, it's very preliminary, but we're extremely encouraged. We have 3 addiction physicians that we've been working with that have started to kind of throw out these questions. Another one that was brought up that we found very interesting is, we use a medication like methadone a lot for chronic pain too. What would it look like for somebody who's receiving methadone for chronic pain if we were to test them with this biomarker test? And what does that mean? So again, the research implications around this are somewhat endless. And we would hope folks like the National Institute on Drug Abuse would be interested in potentially working with us or giving us grants to kind of flesh this out more. But I mean, obviously, from a personal perspective, I'm very excited about this. But, I'm excited about everything that we're doing at Ignite.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, it's just the potential for for clarity for
Yeah.
people. I think would just be very Some people go through years where they don't they aren't willing to admit to themselves, even to
Right.
admit to themselves or just accept to it because it's such a stigmatizing thing where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't want to be put into that bucket where if I if I have to
Exactly.
if I say this thing, then I am this thing, and then that's going to be really horrible for me. And guess what? It can be really horrible for you. People are mean, people are judgy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like that would also help change society and help change the way that people looked at it. And so I think I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited
we
about
are
that.
too.
Yeah. That'll even affect payer policies.
Right.
Right.
You
Right.
know, how many times, drugs or treatment is denied?
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know,
How
because
many
we don't
cycles they'll pay for.
Yeah.
Right.
But dude, that's the thing. That's like literally right. So it's like then we talk about preventative care, right? So it's like, hey man, for me, I've been using opiates a little bit, but it's not like it's an everyday thing or anything like that. But I do go to it sometimes, It's like, okay, but I don't want to do this. I know this is bad. I'd
Yeah.
like to go get treatment.
Right.
I'd like to get treatment now for it because I know that this is already happening. But then I would go to the doctors and they'd say, we need $20K for your inpatient treatment.
Yeah.
We need this. And then if we were able to take a blood test and say, oh no, this person is at risk, and if they don't get this treatment, then there will be a more negative effect on society and on this
Right.
person's health. So let's get this person some preventative help, immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, very well said.
And our job is to recognize those problems and bring solutions to market.
Yeah.
And part of that is listening. I think that's something else that's broken in our healthcare system, especially working in the industry so long. We don't listen.
No.
And by listening to people, listening to physicians and their needs and what they need, we can then drive solutions. And that's, again, something that we're heavily focused on. It doesn't make sense to bring something to market and then be like, oh, yeah, use this here. Well, you're not fixing it. There's no problem.
Right.
So why did you bring this to market?
Right.
So that's why we're heavily listening to the physicians, clinicians, expert advisors that we have in our panels to bring these solutions to market. And then we do the development, commercialize to bring these solutions and solve a problem. So that's kind of how we're looking at it as well. We're not just saying, yeah, we're focused in on behavioral. Well, let's just do this, test that, diagnoses, whatever. Who cares? Let's just, no, we every solution that we bring to market will solve a problem.
Yeah, it's practical.
Yeah.
We employ, we have advisory groups for every disease state that we're working in that are comprised of, physicians and clinicians that work in these areas and have for many years. Yeah. So, our standard approach when starting from scratch is, we take the substance use biomarkers, for example, we show them what we think we have. We show them Patrick's discovery.
Right.
And we just sit back and let them talk, and hear them kind of hash out what they think the implications of this are. But more importantly to us, what we need to develop off of that. And that's, again, what I said about,
Exactly right.
we may have a diagnostic for substance use disorder, which is just mind-blowing by itself, but how can we apply that from a therapeutic perspective?
Yeah.
And again, obviously,
And what's
medications.
next?
Right.
And what's next?
Exactly.
Because there's actually a lot of efficiencies in figuring out what's next.
Right.
And we're learning that now in our current clinical validation study. So by understanding kind of what the problems are altogether, you can kind of design your development process a lot more efficiently.
Yeah.
So again, this is how we're thinking. We're excited about it, and certainly more excited again to just be part of the solution.
Yeah, the implications that it could have within within other mental health states, with depression and PTSD, just like that. For drug specificity, like for me, I mean, I'm a guy who probably 10 years ago would have been diagnosed with some of these, that's the whole thing. It's like I'm a good example of it. I was going through substance use disorder, and that was it. Like there's maybe some small situational depression, situational anxiety that goes along with it, but there's some people that it comes from different places, right? That so to know where that they back then they would have tried to say, hey, they did try to say, hey, Steve, are you bipolar? Are you depressive? Are you you're manic? This and it's like no, that's that. Those were never feelings that I really even had.
Yeah.
I was just trying to listen to what these doctors had to say, right?
Right.
And no one would look at me now and be like, oh, you have any symptoms of bipolar. And when I learned that in school, I remember these clinicians saying this to me, being like, did you guys go to the same, did you learn what bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 was in school?
Yeah.
Do you really think that that's what's going on here?
Right.
Yeah. I'm going through a thing. I just turned my life upside down a little bit. I'm trying to figure this out. I have no support. There's no support in society around it. I'm a kid, so I don't really know what to do. I don't have, the best family support either, So what do and I did have some great family support, and some great, other support, but that's what they're trying to tell people, and they're trying to do this to people all the time. And there's so many people who are just more curious about it too, and really want to figure it out. Like me, I just wanted to get better, and I was going to get better no matter what in my own way, and kind of just take control of it. But there's other people who will listen to those doctors forever, and they'll think that they're this or they're that. If you could rule that, and it's not the doctor's fault; it's how they're trained.
No, it's not. And we have a colleague, Dr. Stu Gitlow, who's an addiction psychiatrist specifically, but he oversees our behavioral pipeline, and he made very similar comments to what you made. And he also brought into focus that there's a precedent for this, that we're starting to see in research, inflammatory markers in conditions like schizophrenia and bipolar and other more physical manifestations that we're correlating now with the disease. So it's not so far-fetched to think that we may be able to come up with a blood test to diagnose schizophrenia, bipolar. I mean, you brought up a great example that I hadn't thought. I was diagnosed with bipolar twice because of my stimulant misuse. And I have never had anything close to that. I have clinical depression, but again, it's the chicken or the egg when we're talking about substance use. But imagine being able to go to, and that was diagnosed by a primary care doctor, is my point. Imagine the primary care doctor had a tool that could differentiate what is truly substance use issue versus a bipolar issue, or maybe even both are truly involved. The utility of that to be able to more efficiently get somebody to the right care it really can't be, you can't put a price on that.
Yeah. But this point of inflammation has implications in other diseases as well.
Right.
Autoimmune and oncology.
Right.
I mean,
we were talking about it with food, it's all inflammation.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean,
it's all your gut. Yeah. It's all this stuff is related to your gut, what we're eating and what we're, it's causing a lot of the mental health crisis that we have.
And we made this point earlier, but it's not the physician's fault. I mean, they come in, and again, they're under pressure to do the right thing. They don't have all the answers, right?
Yeah.
And that's why, and Jake said it earlier, we're going to try this. That's the best biomarker we have today. Trial and error. Try this, fail, try something else, add something on, take something away. And that needs to get better.
Yeah.
That whole practice, and there's not one physician that we spoke to in this journey that, has said, no, we don't need what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. They're like, no, we've been asking for this stuff for a while.
Yeah. I mean, it just with SSRIs, right? Like, you go into your physician's office, or your primary care, you're just something new, a little depression. It's like, hey, let's, you might need, you might even be a little depression. It might be a lot of depression. You might need help fucking now,
Right.
And then
Right.
you get in there and you say, and they're like, hey, this drug should work in like 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
You should start to work then. And if it doesn't, we'll get you off of that, or maybe add an SNRI, add some other, some other things here. Maybe we'll add this for depression too. I mean, this for anxiety as well. And we have no clue, it's really, it's so subjective to whether it's working in the person's body.
How many drugs treat depression?
Yeah.
30, 40, 50? There's so many.
Well,
which one do you pick?
Yeah.
Which one do you pick? Yep.
Right. This was another point that Dr. Gitlow brought up last week when we were chatting with him about choice of antidepressants.
Right.
To your point, Steve, it's clinician experience, and there's always these anecdotes that, well, Lexapro's better for anxiety, and Zoloft is better for PTSD, and there's some data out there that may support some of that, but there's an essence to which of those antidepressants, even within one class, might be best for you.
Yeah.
And we've scratched at that surface with pharmacogenomics, as you've mentioned, but that still doesn't get to the real root of what's driving that response.
It doesn't. But what you just explained is us attempting to build an algorithm to solve the problem.
Right.
All right, you have a liver condition on board, so let's avoid these medications. This is excreted by the kidney, so we're going to avoid this, and you have a kidney complication. So we do that in practice.
Yeah.
And all we're doing at Ignite is figuring out the algorithm as you exist today, providing that solution more real time, so you can draw your blood and administer more effective medical practice.
Yeah.
So then you're getting the answers. You're not playing this guessing game. And all these factors attributed to response are accounted for in our blood test.
Yeah. Again, true individualized medicine.
Yeah. So I see your mind is blown.
My mind's blown, man. My mind is so blown by all of this.
It's exciting stuff.
It's
really awesome.
Yeah, it's really exciting stuff, because it's like, it's stuff that I just know, like I didn't know how it was going to happen. And I technology, for whatever reason, I wasn't thinking about the technology thing. I wasn't thinking about the AI, and that's exactly.
That's really what drove it.
Of course, that's what. Yeah, it's. I was trying to figure out, pharmacogenomics and doing it the old way, and doing lab testing and trying to identify these biomarkers that we have. And I had no idea how we could do that. Take a long time. And to your points, like you said, the small little scratches that we've made with some, some sub receptors with SSRIs and looking within the drug classes.
Right.
It's like, okay, this one may be a little bit different here, and we see this little different of expression, but it's all in this different patient. So by taking a person, you're literally like infusing them with technology, with the algorithm that's been created, and you're giving them personalized outcomes. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
It does not.
It's the beginning of it, and I feel like computational biology and AI have really made a tremendous advancement. It's advanced tremendously in the last 5 to 10 years. 10 years ago we might not, definitely not. And then moreover, what Patrick is doing certainly, adds fuel to the very good fire that we're talking about. And it's just a perfect storm for us because, we have the scientific background. We've been on the business side. We've worked for a payer, worked for a hospital. We've seen the problems in our healthcare system. We've seen what's broken. And now we're just, perfect storm putting it all together. And again, hopefully bringing these solutions to market to help people.
People must be excited. I mean, you guys, I understand that you're looking for funding right now, and it's so if I'm I'm a qualified investor, like I'm jumping at this as fast as I possibly can. Are you guys seeing some of the, you're seeing some of that, in some of the meetings that you're having, or how's that initially going? I know you guys just launched your seed round.
Yeah, we got a pre-seed round last year. with a goal to raise $1.5 million to bring our test from discovery to analytical validation, which is the press release that you saw come out Tuesday. And our next phase is more complicated, as we've already pointed out. Clinical validation study is going to cost a lot more. It's going to take more time, but the pivotal piece to bringing this thing to market. So we are in seed round. We're raising $10 million, to Jake's earlier point, and it's going well. It's not going as well as we want. Obviously, we want
Never
the money,
does.
ASAP, so we can
Yeah.
get started
Right.
on this good work, dude. Right.
It's a grind.
To that,
It's a grind.
I think I will say to that, it's
Yeah.
about finding the right fit too, though, as
Too,
well.
totally.
And so
That's-
that,
yeah.
Totally. We want investors that are involved. We want investors that believe in it.
Yeah.
At times it's one and the same. Investors like, wow, you guys are onto something big here.
Yeah.
And we get that a lot. But also there's been some headwinds. The election. It doesn't matter who won, who's in office. The election itself was causing anxiety in the market.
Yep.
Previous M&A activity gone bad. These private investors, these firms have invested a lot of money in bad ideas over the last 5 years. That's created some tension in the market. So people are kind of just holding on to their money a little bit more.
Yeah.
So all these things, I'm not saying, that's going to cause an issue. We just have to find the right people to help us optimize the opportunity.
Yeah, we'd obviously never done this before. So the question of any entrepreneur is, where do I start? And how do I ask people for money?
Yeah.
That's not an easy thing to do.
We'd have to figure that out.
We have to give the most credit to our investor base because they have expanded this for us. Because the other thing, when you're at the stage that we're at as a company, you're in a kind of an odd place for venture capital and for larger investors. They want to see a real product and they want to see revenue. They don't want to see an idea. So until you get there, you're kind of in this, nebulous
Limbo
area where most of your investors are going to be private investors or what we call family offices, which is a group of family investors. But again, we've been very lucky. I mean, to your point, Steve, I think the story is good. As you can imagine, the usual gut reaction to it is this is too good to be true. And it takes a little bit of time for these people to really grasp an understanding of what it is we have and what we're trying to do. And sometimes that takes getting Patrick on the phone with a potential investor to run through that. And he's been incredible with his time and being able to do that. So we're very lucky. We're very blessed, whatever way you want to say it, to have this incredible group that we work with. We've had varied experiences in healthcare, but we've amassed a huge network of folks that only want to see us succeed and have been very gracious with their time and their advice and reaching out to their network. So, it's not, we're about 10% of it. The people around us are the 90% that have got us to where we are and will continue to propel us forward.
Yeah. And we also have some really good bites recently on the investment side that I think at the beginning of 25, I think we're going to be a very good spot.
As everyone gets ready to see the election's over, right? Like I think that's probably what a hard time to rate.
It's been a huge factor.
Really great partners on the horizon and some really interesting people that believe in what we're doing and can really drive, financial opportunities for us. And the other thing I'll say too, I mean, frankly, we've proven stuff, but we haven't. So I think that's a big limiting factor as well. I think once we are able to take this all the way through clinical validation, I think that the floodgates open at that particular time because now we've discovered it, we've developed it, and we've proved it. We haven't done all those three things yet.
I think there's going to be a lot of people who are pissed off, that they didn't invest in you guys once that happens.
I
what I'm saying?
That might be the case.
Yeah.
But again, we can't say that.
No, I think it's definitely going to be the case. So you say, you can't, you don't know until you know.
That's right.
But it's this, the what you guys have, what you have the ability to test here is going to be so I'm trying to think in my head this whole conversation. I've been trying to think of like a clinical trial that I could reference that was like as impactful as what you guys are doing, and I don't know if there's one. I don't know if there's one that if you guys are when you are successful, will have a larger impact on a a larger patient population and affect cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really thought of it from that
Yeah.
perspective. But if we look at it kind of from the reverse side, if you look at some of the landmark clinical trials that we've seen in medicine, let's use statins as an example, Lipitor, Zocor, right?
Yeah.
Those will reduce the risk of a heart attack or a stroke by 35% in most patients. That was a landmark clinical trial. So putting that in perspective with what we are confident we'll be able to show is pretty mind-blowing. To your point.
30 to 35%. This is another small number.
Yeah.
If we can get
Right.
100% of patients on the right therapy, 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And I'll say one more thing about investment. And you kind of hinted on this earlier. Not every investor is the right investor at that particular time. So a lot of the feedback we get is, you're just too early, or you're pre-revenue, or, so we had literally in our office, we have like lists and lists of people we've spoken to that, okay, we'll revisit them in Series B.
Yeah.
We'll visit them later on. When we have revenue, we'll visit this investor.
Yeah.
As we listen, we write the notes, and we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Well, for sure we will. And we respect that. You're just
Very
too
much so.
early. You're fine.
Mm-hmm.
You don't invest.
Yeah.
A lot of these bigger investors want to take less risk, so they want to put more money in, take less upside risk, upfront risk.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that's why you guys are, you're making your bones right now with the family offices and people who are, like to explore with a little bit more risk
that's
because
right.
there's a little bit more upside on the other end of it.
Lower
And so-
amounts, bigger return versus larger amounts, smaller return but less risk. So that's how.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to the point that they've been burned many, many times.
Yeah.
Been sold on really some bad ideas.
Yeah.
Of course.
And it just money is a little tougher.
Yeah.
It is.
And again, it's been a great learning journey for us.
Yeah.
That was actually my next question.
Yeah.
We are absolutely blessed to have advisors around who have pushed us in the right direction and pushed us out of the wrong direction.
Right.
There are a lot of companies out there or firms, investors that want to take advantage of you. They want to take advantage of the fact that this is two clinicians who have never started a company and never raised money before.
Right.
So we'll give you $1 million, but we want 60% of your company.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen enough Shark Tank to know that it's probably not the way to
Probably
go.
not a
Bad
good idea.
deal.
But
bad deal.
but when you're in the early stages and you really want to get
We're not that
going,
desperate.
you're like, oh, okay, is this the standard? Is this what
Yeah.
we need to expect?
Right.
Yeah.
And again, luckily we have the people around us go, no,
Yeah.
tell them no, thank you, and move on.
Yep. Good for, and that's the whole thing. That's you guys should, maybe that is something that you should say, because definitely investors will be, will be hearing this podcast is, it's not that they, there's also times where people did offer you money and you said no.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
The deal didn't.
There is such thing as the wrong money.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that comes with baggage typically. Things that they want us to do or want us to change that we're just not willing to do. Where we know who we are.
Yeah,
We're
transparent.
We're not changing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really not
transparent, man.
always.
I love it. You're not changing. That's what we like to
changing
have that run by, like, that's who we need running companies is people who have, good morals or, have integrity.
Yeah.
They want to do the right thing. They have a reason for doing it. Like humanity will change overnight if we can actually put this stuff into motion.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of our quotes, and it's really the ethos of Ignite, and it's on our website at the bottom. You're going to miss it. We're in the process actually revamping the website. But you'll notice at the bottom it says profitability through social responsibility. That comes from one of our investors and board members. And I love it because typically we look at business as not doing both or can't do both. Or you can't live in a world where you're responsible socially or responsible at all and be profitable. I disagree. Right. We disagree. We think we can live in a world that we can do both. Be ethically and morally responsible, socially responsible, but yet be profitable. Sure, why not?
Dude, this is especially with healthcare, right?
Yeah.
Like this is a thing that I battle with, right? Like because it's when people, a common term that people will say is like, oh, it's just business. It's not personal.
No, it has to be personal, especially in healthcare.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
The economics.
That's cold.
Yeah, the economics that can't apply. We talked about tech and transport. They don't apply to healthcare. So let's change all of the rules, and that's how we're ingraining, the mentality, the thinking at Ignite, it's not just the technology. It's everything that we do. That's something that Jake and I, from the beginning, we have aligned on and we haven't moved from.
No,
Everything that goes into this, it has that in mind. Even the employees, as we mentioned earlier, everything has to be different because it has to drive change, and it has to look and smell the way that we want it to smell. And that smell is, look, we're driving change. We're bringing solutions to market. We're treating people better. We're being socially responsible.
Yeah.
At
You
the
got
end
to
of the
show
day,
people, right? You got to do it. You can be authentic
Yeah.
in it. That's the only way. The truest way to do it, the most authentic way to do it, is roll up your sleeves and show people.
Yeah.
Say, hey, we can't. You don't think this is possible?
Yeah.
You don't think that you can remove this and
That's
make
right.
healthcare much more accessible for people and cheaper and more efficient? Watch us do it.
And let the science and the technology speak for itself.
Simple.
If it's accurate, if it's disruptive, and if it solves a problem, it will move, and you will be profitable. And then at the same time, you're solving a massive social problem.
Right.
So, we're excited about that.
I'm excited about it. I'm super excited about it, man. I share with you guys, like I my story. Obviously, I disillusioned with pharmacy pretty early on. Usually it takes some people some time, but my experience led me to, it's like, hey, there's some good here, but there's not a ton of it, there's a ton of good people and a ton of good work being done, but it's all convoluted.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
We all work retail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've worked those shifts and seen the problem head on, and one pharmacist filling thousands of prescriptions in one shift. I mean, how can you not take a step back and look at the problem right in front of us? I mean, we are down this path of just pushing drugs, and that needs to change. And we talk about changing the healthcare system. We're pharmacists, and we're saying, we're not saying don't use drugs. We're just saying use it at the right time. Apply the technology to use it at the right time.
Exactly. When you have a really, really bad headache and you have a really ton of it, maybe use some Advil, but try some stuff way before that. Try, there's a thousand things that you can do before that, and understanding that and knowing
That's
that.
right.
And I just knew it. I just lost faith. I lost hope, and I just didn't think that I didn't think that, especially not this quickly, that I would be considering oh my God, this is amazing. I can't wait to help these guys in any way that I can. I can't wait to, look at more pharmacy stuff. I can't wait to, explore this with more people.
Yeah.
I to be honest, I'm flabbergasted by that, because I disassociated. I said that this is, it's not that it's not good. It's just, it's messy. It's mixed up, and people are, and I can't, I got to do it my own way. And that's what I've done here, is I just educate people on what I've learned, and by having great conversations with people, and, people end up learning, they end up going, it's great. People who listen to the show, they'll come on and, they'll be like, oh man, I didn't know that, that I could have that opinion.
Right.
Or that I was allowed to think that way.
Right.
And it's like, oh man, no, me too. That's probably how I felt my whole life, until I started doing this and started to free myself from it. And
Sure.
and you guys, what you guys have done is you create a system in a platform where the smartest people will get to come play, and the smartest people, I can't imagine when they have access to this, when the physicians and the people who are the researchers who have access to this, and what they're going to actually be able to figure out, right off.
Yeah.
It's going to be incredible. I bet that that's too, is I think that this could, you guys already know, this could lead to so many things that we learn about the body, and about treatment, and about other disease states, and about immunology in general, and about gut health, and about inflammation and stuff that we could really solve some problems here.
Yeah.
And so
You really can.
I'm grateful to you guys for for creating this, and for finding this, and deciding to take the step to bring it to market, because holy shit, right? It's not easy to you both have families, you both are you had really good careers where you could make plenty of fucking money and do your thing, and you got, that's the thing, is these two guys, man, they could have coasted, and not coasted just been fine, coasted to the tune of fucking really, really good salaries, top 5% salaries, executives at pharma companies who are super successful, and just coasted and said, sure, this is, blah, 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 this is good, healthcare is good. But instead you buck that, and you look in the face and say, no, I'm going to do something different with the brain that I've been given, and the experience that I've had, and the respect that I have for you guys is immense on that, and that's how I know the story is going to be a good one.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, brother. We
Thank you
love
for
Yeah.
recognizing that, because it wasn't an easy decision. I mean,
No.
that decision is tough, man. I mean, I think,
It's daunting.
yeah,
It's daunting. To your point, I mean, we have extensive careers in pharma.
Yeah.
And like most, we could just jump to the next job and be paid very well and be very comfortable and actually have a flexible job.
Yeah.
Usually got to travel a little bit, but still be restricted.
yeah,
Be restricted in how we practice our art.
yeah,
And,
yeah, exactly.
putting that aside, when an opportunity like this comes, it seems like a no-brainer, but as I kind of alluded to, it's also daunting, because starting a company and taking a risk like this when you have families
Right.
is not an easy thing to do.
No, no,
But this is the first thing, and I've had some other small entrepreneurial experiences, but this was the first thing where I just, from day one, it was I'm all in. I'm willing to take the risk.
Yeah.
I'm
Same.
I don't even see it
Yeah.
as a risk. I
Same.
see this.
I don't
I
see it as a
can't
risk
see
either.
how this isn't
Yeah.
going to work.
yeah,
It's so drastically needed, and the feedback we've gotten the 2 years from all the stakeholders involved has been overwhelmingly positive.
yeah.
So it's
We never look back.
no,
haven't
we
looked
never
back.
have.
We
I mean,
haven't looked back.
we always say you want to have a
Yeah.
job where you get up every morning and you don't
Yeah,
regret having to go to work that day.
yeah.
And I've had some jobs where I've come close, maybe
Totally.
three out
I
of
think we
3
all
out of
have.
5 days a
Yeah,
week.
yeah.
But this is every morning, partially because it's ours.
Yeah.
And, we're invested in it in a different level, both financially and personally. But it's just, we know we're going to make a difference. And it makes it easy to put in the work.
Yeah,
So when we have weeks where we're working 60, 70 hours trying to make this happen, it's not exhausting. It's
No.
not debilitating.
It really
it's not
isn't.
something you complain about. And you don't realize it until the week after it happens. You're like, holy shit,
yeah,
we were nuts last week. We were on planes and then we were on calls and we're talking to investors and it's like,
Yeah.
all good, on to the next.
and it's funny. We really, even when we're off, we're on.
Yeah.
So you take a day off, but you got to check your email. You got to check something, because obviously an investor might be emailing you, or
Right.
somebody is emailing you a
Right.
question, or so, obviously if Jake is alerted to it, he'll text me, hey, this is going on. I know you're on vacation, but I don't mind it. I actually
No.
really enjoy it, because it doesn't seem like, even though we're off,
Yeah.
technically, we're not really off. We can't be off.
Yeah.
But also, I love it. I enjoy what
Yeah.
we're doing. So that, I know it sounds corny as hell, but you're right. You found something. I found something. I think Jake as well. We found something that we look at and we're like, wow, this is not only our baby, but this is something that can change a lot of people's lives. It can make a tremendous impact. And that's, I think, why we're so passionate about it. And I think we have a good working relationship as well. I mean, I think from the beginning, he's looking at me.
I can't really stand the guy.
Yeah,
but
right.
I see, the opportunity here. So I
Yeah,
just can't
yeah.
pass it up.
But I think, something I give Jake a lot of credit is, since day one, I remember in your apartment looking at the whiteboard and we're drawing everything out, everything we have to do. And you said, doesn't matter, every day, let's focus in on what we need to do. Let's keep pushing forward. Let's not stop. Every day, let's figure out what we need to do. Keep pushing. And that was big. That was a big change for me,
Yeah.
because I'm more of a forward thinker,
Yeah.
and to kind of concentrate on, something.
Yeah.
But it's totally right.
Yeah.
I wish entrepreneurs, that would be my advice
Yeah.
to a lot of entrepreneurs, is don't focus in on what you need to do a year from now. Focus in on what you need to accomplish today,
Yeah.
tomorrow, the next day. That's huge.
And
That was a learning curve for me.
Well, yeah, I think, and I can see
know.
Steve smirking over there out of the corner
Yeah.
of my eye, but that's
Yeah.
a part of our recovery. I mean, that's not to be cliche, but one day at a time. And
Yeah.
I'm putting that aside because I'm not a diehard 12-step guy or anything, but just the best skill that I learned through that experience was to focus on what's in front of me.
And it's really
And
funny that you're
not to
saying that now.
worry
I didn't know
about-
that.
Yeah, and I'm realizing it, saying it out loud, that I never really explained that to you, but control what I can control.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the day. And I took a risk 15 years ago and I tried it that way.
Yeah.
And everything worked out. So
Yeah.
I'm not changing at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
When you have such a big thing to tackle, whether it is like healing from recovery, like people who have to take this step. It's your whole life is fucked up because that's what leads the drugs lead you to that. The alcohol leads you to that. So to be able to have that vision, like you get lost in it. That's why a lot of people don't get well.
Totally.
Exactly.
Same thing with a big company. If you have the vision,
no question.
and it's nice to have that vision. Keep that in your head. Keep hold on to that.
Yeah.
But just hold on to it. Then fucking get back to the work. Get
Right.
back into the day.
Exactly.
Become present and get through it.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of balls in the air. No question. There's a lot of things going on, but we focus in on what needs to be done today, this week.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can't do it.
Yeah.
You need to focus in, and a lot of the times, I had to check myself. I give Jake a call. I'm like, hey, I'm not doing anything around these times. And then we think about it. We're like,
what do we have to do today?
oh, no, everything's
we're good.
everything's moving. Everything's moving. It's just we're at the place where we're waiting on a lot of feedback. We're waiting on responses.
Yeah.
We're good, but I have to kind of have that. We both do it.
Yeah.
We have that check in and say, what's going on? But I think it works because of that. I think we both have the same passion, and everything else figures itself out.
Yeah, it does, and we've also, again, we have great advisors around us, and
that's the other
we've
thing.
been blessed to have experience of being able to observe other startups.
Yeah.
And, the common mistake that I'd say the great majority of them make is they think they are what they see in the future. They think they're there already, and they want to operate on that level, and what ends up translating from that is they burn through all their cash.
Yeah.
They hire this overbloated C-suite and sales force.
Yeah.
Where they're not having anything to sell yet. They don't have a product, or they have very limited
Premature.
coverage.
Yeah.
And we said, no, that's not who we are yet.
No.
We're not there yet, and we don't need that. We don't need to bring in 5 or 6 other employees right now because there's nothing for them to do.
I mean, we even did this with advice on a CFO.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you need to bring a CFO on. So we reached out to some folks, and we landed on hiring a controller from an agency that we loved working with, and we loved what they said. So that's basically our CFO. We're slightly outsourcing what we need to do, what a CFO would need to do, and solving that.
Yeah.
And let them manage and solve that for us.
Right.
And that avoids us
At
hiring-
15% of the cost. It
Right.
would.
At a
To
much
bring
lower
somebody on.
cost. And for now, that's sufficient for us.
Absolutely.
So we're making those distinct decisions. And I think we're being smart about it, really smart about it. And how we manage it.
I would agree. I think that your focus is, you guys are so tuned in to your focus, and you're putting the resources where the resources should go right now,
Exactly.
which is giddy up creation,
Development.
development.
It's
Exactly.
development.
Yeah.
And eventually, guess what? You guys will need a CFO, and you will need to
Of
bring
course.
somebody on, and you'll
course.
because things will be flowing more, and you'll be managing way more products, and way more money, way more stuff coming in. There'll be way more deals that are happening,
Yeah.
and then you'll get to that. I think you're going at such the right pace, and like it's funny because it does take a couple of times, right? I've had a couple of businesses where I've gone through it a few times, and now I'm going through it. And I feel like this time I'm getting my footing. I'm starting to get my
Agreed.
footing, and I'm starting to figure it out and figuring how I can exist and what I can bring to the world. And it took a while. It takes a while. It takes a lot of learning, a lot of experience. You need to have all these different failures. I don't even like to call them failures because it's like I learn from them. They feel like failures when you're going through them, and you're like shit, and you get mad at yourself or whatever. But then when you learn from it, you just say, oh, that was just a giddy up. That was just a thing that I needed to learn and needed to experience so that I could get to this level. And you guys are like on it. I think that you're on such a your experience, where you're at with your careers, your age, the ability to kind of just want to go chase it a little bit. I think that's being able to have the ability to do that. Being able to you were able to provide for yourselves in your career, so you could give yourself a little bit of run here. And I'm super excited to see where it goes.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think we're also, another point is, I think we're also humble enough to understand what we don't know, and to kind of ask for advice. And that's the other thing. A lot of younger entrepreneurs, period, they want to put on this mask that they know everything. And we can't do that because otherwise you get in trouble. I mean, you can't can't make assumptions in this business. Can't make assumptions in any business, but especially in healthcare, right? You cannot structure a business on assumption and pretending. And we've never done that.
No, we never have, and it's cost us money to do that, but we're not going to waver from that. Again, we don't have it all figured out. You know, we have some great experiences, and we got a great network, and the network is more important.
Yeah, and then we find somebody who knows.
Yep.
We've always found we got a question, we don't know it. We always find somebody that knows.
Within a business that is predicting things upon 100% accuracy, the fact that you guys are running your company like that, I think that there's a lineage there.
Yeah.
I think there
you got to walk the walk.
Yeah, perfection.
You got to walk the walk. Where if people wanted to find you guys and wanted to have some, they're interested in investing, they were interested in having some more conversations with you. How can this be a possibility? How can we make this happen?
We'll give you Claudio's home address.
Don't do that, Lauren. We've not.
No, of course not.
No, I think if you want to get involved in any regard, go to our website, ignitebiomedical.com. It's, again, in the process of being updated, but you can still do that today and put in your contact information, send us a note, and we'll be in touch. And it could be anything. You want to learn more. You want to understand what we're getting into. You work for a firm. You're an investor, whatever it may be. Reach out. And if you like what you hear, if you want to be a part of the journey, we take the stance that we really will talk to anybody. We really will talk to anybody that's really passionate and interested in what we're doing, because that's part of it. Because we're, again, bringing solutions to market for us, for people. So every single one of those people interested, that's part of the journey. Yeah. So reach out, questions, insights, want to be a part of it, learn what we're doing. Again, it doesn't have to be investment.
No.
Reach out and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, we're on social media.
Yeah.
Instagram, Facebook, X, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That's probably your best source to get continuous information.
Yeah.
Connect with us, like our posts. Again, we're in the process of, revamping all the social media and the website and having somebody manage that where we can push out a lot of content on a regular basis. But there are plenty of opportunities to get involved, and we encourage you guys to reach out. And anytime we're very accessible and we're willing to talk to anybody that has some ideas or advice for us.
Yeah. Feedback, problems, there might be something that we overlook, or it might be a problem in our healthcare system that we've overlooked that we don't know of. For example, treatment response was something. The numbers around that and what we learned throughout this process, I didn't know before I started this process. No. I didn't know that we were sitting on $1 trillion unrecognized problem in our healthcare system.
Clue.
No idea. So if you have these nuggets, if any information we can share, we can push, to Jake's point, we can also, push some of that content through our social media platforms to highlight the problem or bring the problem to light.
Yep.
Maybe you had a personal experience. Maybe what we're talking about, like, I experienced non-response, or I experienced this and it led me to A, B, and C, and it was awful. Give us the okay to share that, we will. And that's how each and every person can help.
Yeah, that's a great one, and definitely one for my audience too. Like, if you have ever had non-response, if you're someone with non-response in any type of medicine, specifically to here IBD, colitis, Crohn's, then please reach out to these guys, because that's testimonials and letting people know that this is a thing that is so prevalent. I mean, the data speaks for itself, but then also pairing that with human beings and letting them know. That this is a real thing that's affecting people every single day. People that had to take a TNF inhibitor for a full year, 18 months to realize that it didn't work. They have all types of injection site reactions that they have going on. They have hard lumps in their body, in their fatty tissue now, and they, maybe there's a lymphoma risk. There's a lot of never mind the money that went into that. The cost of paying that for that drug every single month. That came out of their their insurance that they paid for through their premiums and. So I think that's so great what you guys are doing. I think that if people need to, Ignite Biomedical, please, people, reach out. Obviously, you guys, you can reach out to me too, and I can direct you to these guys. This is a special thing that you guys are doing. I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm a part of it. It's man, I'm a part of it. We're all a part of it. Exactly.
Yeah, whether we want to. Realize that or not.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. We're all a part of it, man. We're all a part of this change. We're all a part of this beautiful thing. And to see Jake a couple of years ago, to see it to where it is now, and to see you guys doing this together, it's like I'm positive that this is going to be a success, and I'm positive that this is going to change healthcare. That people, it's gonna be $1 billion company. That's what I do believe that. Like from what you guys develop and whatever. But money doesn't even matter because what you guys are going to do is going to have such
that's
a
not the driving force.
exactly
Yeah,
right. Exactly, it's going to be $1 billion company,
Yeah.
but that's not the driving force. Obviously,
No.
for the conversation that we've had and just knowing you guys, you're truly trying to revolutionize medicine and revolutionize healthcare, and I think that's what's going to take place here.
Yeah.
So I thank both of you for coming on the show today.
Of course, man.
Always an honor, brother.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anytime, man.
we'll be doing some content together. We'll be doing some
good.
more stuff. I want to follow this journey and keep up on it and inform everybody about what's going on with you guys. As you reach your different steps and after we have success in in your clinical trial, all 900 patients, we figure out exactly who needs the TNFI and who doesn't. We'll have you guys back on. But thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Love you
Thank
both.
you.
Thank
Love
you,
you too,
man.
man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Giddy up. Guys, thank you so much. Please check out my friends. Check out their company, Ignite Biomedical. Check us out. Follow us. Subscribe. Do that for them as well. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, giddy up.